Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Crypto Crunch, where we take a look at the crypto sphere and attempt to tie back to the larger macroeconomic environment. In order to help us through that journey, we're joined by Tuur Demeester, founding partner of Adamant Capital, an early Bitcoin adopter from way back in 2012. His background in Austrian economics and specializes in the study of boom and bust cycles in the economy. Now welcome, Tuur. Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
All right, so to kick things off today, I mean, there's so much news over this weekend, it's hard to narrow down exactly what to speak about, but I suppose we have to start with the catalyst of it all, which is, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping coming out saying that his country will be embracing blockchain technology. Now, firstly, just to get your overarching view, Tuur, what do you think of this statement? Is it as significant as people in the sphere have made it out to be? What do you think it means for the future of the crypto sphere?
Well, significant, I would say it is and it isn't. The way I view these kind of statements and these kind of projects, similar to Libra, similar to, Western central banks that are talking about launching their own cryptocurrencies. I see this as basically equivalent to the counter-reformation of the Catholic Church, way back when Protestants started pushing back against the Catholic monopoly on all kinds of things in the economy. I think today, in a way, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin community is pushing back against things that were considered to be just a matter of fact, that the government issues currency and that's the way it is. And so we're seeing pushback from the cryptocurrency space, and then we're seeing kind of like a reaction from the establishment. That's how I see this. It's not inconceivable that, we will indeed see some kind of new initiatives from these central banks, but ultimately they're never going to want to give up control. So I don't think the fundamental nature of their currency is really going to change. Maybe the composition of their basket is going to change. I do think it would be a big change if we see asset-backed currencies again. And of course, Libra is kind of the very first step in that direction, where you just have a mix of fiat currencies. But over time, that could change, right? They might add a little bit of Bitcoin to the mix or some other things. So very interesting. But honestly, I don't think this was the catalyst really for the Bitcoin price rally. I feel like that's more a narrative that was slapped on after the fact.
All right. So then, of course, you've segued me beautifully into that topic of conversation. What is it in your mind that was the key catalyst? What drove that unprecedented rally, or perhaps a rarely precedented rally in Bitcoin that we saw over the weekend?
Well, I mean, it's always easy to say in hindsight, but I would say what happened was that the market got oversold. And so it's similar to, like, if you have a lot of dry brush in a forest, at some point there's going to be a forest fire. And so I think what's happening is that you just have more institutional money starting to play around with Bitcoin and treating it like something that has to generate income, especially, if you're market neutral. And then, we have like a market that's moving sideways or down since July. What do? Is you short, you sell, short-term call options, all kinds of things that make you more neutral and allow you to make some money on the way. And if you go too far, at some point, the market is gonna, call you on it, and then all your stop losses get liquidated. So you have a big short squeeze. So I think that's part of it. And of course, it's really hard to know. There's no total transparency. It looks like volume-wise, it was this rally was originated on BitMEX. So yeah, it could be just a very large fund that decided to allocate just a little bit, and that was enough to just kind of push the price high enough so that all these stops then cascaded. So yeah, I mean, this is Bitcoin, and this is we see the gains in Bitcoin are made for around 36 days every year. If you take 36 days, you put them all together, those are all the gains that you see in Bitcoin. All the other days, without those big leap days, Bitcoin would actually slowly go down by 25% a year. But that being said, like, we are used to moves of 20%, 15% in Bitcoin. This was really exceptional. I believe it hasn't happened like this since about 6 years, the largest one-day rally in 6 years. So to me, what this is signaling is just that we are in a bull market. Like this is a roaring bull market, and it's just getting started.
Right, you even tweeted out in what has come to be a slightly controversial tweet, the notion that, and I'll quote here, all else equal, Bitcoin only needs another 9 days like today, plus 22%, to trade at $50,000. I mean, that's a powerful sort of notion to stake, that these sort of incredible price jumps on 1 day turnarounds are sort of almost a fundamental staple of the Bitcoin market. I mean, does that make sense to you? Do you think that's healthy for the market, or would you like to see those sort of trends pare down?
Yeah, of course, a number of people thought I meant like 9 consecutive days, which obviously is not going to happen. And I want to correct what I said earlier. It's actually 10 days every year that Bitcoin leaps up, and those are the 10 days that make up all the gains of Bitcoin over the years, every year. So 1 day every 36 days, we have, on average, of course, we have a rally like that. And usually they're clustered together during bull markets. That's how we see these incredible gains. But yeah, I mean, it is true. Like, basically in Bitcoin, what you have to do is you have to be willing to endure those 35 days of pain to then get a 1 day where you get rewarded. Because it is very volatile. It's incredibly emotional, this market. There's a lot of people that don't really understand the fundamentals, and so they get caught in these bull traps. And it was very hard because if you look at the chart, like we actually did have crucial support at like in the low 7,000s, and had that broken, the market would have looked totally different, right? I mean, we could still talk about a reaccumulation phase then, but it might have then gone on for 6 more months, for example. So it was a very technically precarious position to see the market down in the 7,300s there recently.
Yeah, it certainly did look precarious, and sentiment all over seemed to be pretty grim. It seemed that there wasn't necessarily a lot of positivity in the sort of market, at least as far as a lot of the metrics we encountered it here, and a lot of those experts that I was speaking to on the matter said. Which is why I wonder, do you so many have said the focus on this Chinese narrative and Xi Jinping's statement were at least a way to get that ball rolling. Do you really not see that as being integral at all to the market surge? Do you think it really just came down to those fundamentals and they were in there and people just weren't seeing what was in front of them?
Well, it's been hard to really see how much buying comes out of China because we don't have the Chinese exchanges online anymore. Whereas historically, what you could do is just look at the price premium that people would pay in a certain country to get their hands on some Bitcoin, because that's what happens. You have a local exchange; they have so many Bitcoin on the books, and then when people rush in to buy, then the price gets pushed up way above global levels, and that's how you see like, oh yeah, there's a run on Bitcoin in this country. But yeah, it's hard with Bitcoin in China because they tend to buy, maybe Tether, and then they send those Tether to an international exchange. It's kind of a more gray market there, how those Bitcoins are bought. So it's hard to say. I cannot imagine this not having any effect. But yeah, if anything, the fact that we have no idea where this buying is coming from fundamentally, like maybe BitBank knows who owns the account. It could be from anywhere. I think that actually shows what kind of a global phenomenon Bitcoin really is. And that you have to always be aware that if you think about the market, if you think you know what the sentiment is, just realize that you're probably living, I mean, almost by definition, you live in sort of a bubble with the people around you. Like, for example, me here in the US, but it's a global market. Anyone can just come up and buy a chunk, and it's extremely scarce. It's an extremely scarce resource. So then you get price spikes like this.
And certainly, you do get those sort of price spikes coming out of seemingly nowhere or from very unknown sources. But as well, I want to talk then moving from that China angle, because another key part of the narrative that played out over the last weekend, we saw, for example, Backed seeing all-time highs in their Bitcoin futures contracts in terms of exchanges on a single day. Now, still relatively small compared to sort of main competitor CME, but certainly a growing trend after what was an incredibly tepid launch. Tuur, do you see that as a positive sign for the market as a whole, and do you think that that sort of trend can continue from that institutional perspective?
Yeah, very, very positive. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily the volumes, but just the fact that these instruments are available and that those markets are getting more and more liquid. Because if you think of it, if you're a traditional firm and you want to get involved in the Bitcoin space, then you want to expose yourself to one, a particular set of risks, and you want to hedge away many, many other risks. And that's what these derivatives are good for. So if we want Bitcoin to be adopted globally, by many institutions, we need these kind of liquid derivatives markets, and it's really excited to see them being built. Of course, we also need, good custody solutions, insurance, and all that. And I mean, Bitcoin is just 10 years old, but we are already seeing all those things being built.
Yeah, certainly those products are even growing before our eyes. I mean, even in the last couple of hours, we've heard an announcement from Bakkt that they themselves are developing a consumer app to allow purchases to be made by consumers using cryptocurrencies. This project, obviously, being backed, as it were, by by ICE, their parent company, by Bakkt itself. These legitimate names in the marketplace. Is that going to be the tipping point to mass adoption? And is it going to come from that top-down perspective, particularly speaking to the point you made earlier regarding sort of the old establishment narrative, counter-reformation sort of idea? How do you sort of see all those notions fitting together?
Well, yeah, I mean, from an economic point of view, it's a gold rush, really. It's kind of, it's a rush to get there first, to get to those, juicy millennials that own some Bitcoin and that might become the future family offices. It's a bit more of a challenge for, the existing players, because they have to kind of try to adapt to the mindset and the kind of things that Bitcoin adopters need. And so it's a race from both sides. It's a race from the bottom up, where you see these Bitcoin native startups, and then of course the existing institutions. I think Fidelity is a shining example of how to do it right so far. Obviously they want to extend their services as well to include these products. And then, I mean, the arbiter ultimately is going to be regulators and government. So we're going to have to see over the longer run how that plays out. Because right now, Bitcoin is kind of internationally seen. Bitcoin is a plaything, right? It's what, $200 billion, something like that. It's tiny compared to these massive pools of liquidity in the world. But of course, if we think about a $50,000 Bitcoin, $100,000 Bitcoin, then we start talking about 1 trillion and up, and that's where you get into geopolitically very different waters. That's where Bitcoin might be perceived as a threat, more likely so. And so in order to keep Bitcoin alive, we do need the grassroots to be very vigilant and keep the network decentralized and secure, and to empower individuals to still run their own nodes and store their own Bitcoin, so that they always have the option to exit if they don't like where the political winds are blowing, for example.
But I wonder, I mean, looking at even beyond Bitcoin to blockchain technology as a whole, and even the entire notion of digital assets, and this sort of is trying to bring this conversation full circle to what we were talking about with Libra, with China, with these big players getting involved in digital assets market again, whether we call it a true cryptocurrency or not is obviously a matter for debate, but they're getting into the digital assets market and sort of coloring it with the brush of big business or with powerful countries, even a narrative of a clash of civilizations obviously coming into the sort of mix. Do you worry that that risks tainting the sort of vision of Bitcoin or of other cryptocurrencies as a whole, whereby sort of distorting what the original vision really was? And do you think that's important?
I don't know. I mean, if anything, it just broadens the debate. It means everybody has to have an opinion about these things. Like, what is a digital asset? What is Bitcoin? How are they different? What is even, and that makes you think, like, what is currency? And so I think this is healthy. I love that there's 1,000 different projects, but I do think ultimately there is a fundamental distinction between a decentralized cryptocurrency and what people call digital assets, or blockchains that are usually actually really centralized. So if you have a slightly optimized database, I don't know if that's so, shocking or revolutionary. Of course, it might make things a bit more efficient. That's fine, but I think it's important to keep that distinction in mind. And that's maybe where the danger is, that the public can be confused to think that a Libra is similar to a Bitcoin, even though from, many, many perspectives, it's completely different. Like, Libra would be entirely centralized, of course, and Bitcoin is not.
Certainly, that narrative, I guess, will cause an issue in the public's mind, whether they're able to distinguish between the two, whether they're able to split or not split between the two. But ultimately, if I were to get your summary in a sort of a brief few words, do you think that Bitcoin is able, as that sort of true decentralized currency, to prevail even in an ever-growing competitive market?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin is by far the most secure network. It has the Lindy effect. It's the oldest out there. It's the most robust. It has an incredible developer community. And I don't mean by that in numbers. I just mean in terms of quality of people. Like, these are cypherpunks who have built some of the most powerful privacy and internet tools available, peer-to-peer tools. Like, these are the people working on Bitcoin. There's a whole new generation excited about the Lightning Network, which is going to obviously boost peer-to-peer payments and make it available for the masses. And then on the custody side, we're seeing these smart contracts that allow for incredibly sophisticated storage mechanisms, the likes we have never seen in history. It's really incredible, the kind of custody possibilities that are now emerging that will make insurance of Bitcoin more feasible as well. So just very, very exciting. And no, I just don't see any competition coming anywhere close to Bitcoin's value proposition. I still think it's the most undervalued liquid asset in the world.
All right, and then in terms of that value proposition, in terms of reference to the sort of those 10 days a year, you said that give that real boost to the market. Looking forward to the year ahead in 2020, do you have an idea of where you think Bitcoin might be in terms of its market value?
I mean, I think that, like I said, we're back in the race now, and so we have this parabolic uptrend that is intact. I usually really don't. I don't like to have particular price targets coinciding with time. I would say I will not be surprised if the top of this particular bull market, if we're somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
Okay, certainly. Well, it could be exciting times if we hit those particular price goals, whether sooner, later, or somewhere in between. But in the meantime, Tuur Demeester, I want to thank you so much for coming and speaking with us at BLOCKTV after an important, historic weekend for Bitcoin and crypto markets as a whole. Fascinating to see what's developing in the sphere. So make sure you stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.